you so much for coming to the PLC webinar series number 3. We're going to look at short and long-term goals for effective PLCs. First and foremost, we want to thank the New Hampshire Department of Education. They're the reason that we can bring you all these webinars for free. We have a great partnership with them all around data and how we can create a more collaborative culture. So we appreciate that. Everyone is muted. We can't hear you. If you have questions, if you could ask them in the Q&A section of your Zoom screen. It is a webinar format, so raising your hand is a little bit hard with the number of people that end up coming to the webinars. So the Q&A is going to be the best section. I have my colleague here, and we will be trading off on what we are doing for presenting, and then we'll feed each other the questions if we have them. For the fourth one here, tomorrow you will receive an email. It's about 24 hours after the end of this webinar, so just hold tight. It'll be tomorrow afternoon, early evening. It will have a link to your PD certificate, where you can find the video of this recorded webinar, the information for the slides, and any other documents that we might be talking about. At the end, we have a brief survey. Your feedback is appreciated. We've been looking at it all throughout and trying to make some different corrections here and there. So please take the time. It's just a few questions. We would love to hear what you have to say. As for our team today, I'm Heather Jenkins, and I have my colleague here, Marissa Hooper.
Hi, everyone.
And then Kristen Crawford is the main contact for the data coaching contract, contact for the data coaching contract for the New Hampshire Department of Education. She, I don't believe, is on this today, but we have her information at the end of this webinar if you ever need to contact her. So for this particular PLC series, these are the targets for the whole thing. So if this is your first webinar that you are coming to for PLC, we've had a couple before now, and then we have one more coming up in the next week or so. But overall, we want you to understand that professional learning communities are both about student and adult learning. So it's not just all about student data and making sure that students are getting everything they need. We as educators need to be working ourselves as well to be able to respond to that data and really work with each other to create this collaborative environment. Another one of the targets is to make sure that we understand what the responsibilities are and what happens in a professional learning community cycle, and then to implement those protocols and consistent systems to make sure that we have highly functioning teams and that that collaborative culture is a safe and predictable environment for folks. This third webinar today, our targets are going to be how you analyze data and how that is interpreted into and put into a year-long SMART goal or any other SMART goal in general. So we're going to talk a lot about SMART goals today. We're going to talk about the short-term ones and then the long-term ones. A lot of us are used to creating an SLO or a student learning objective or a SMART goal for the year, but we want to also show you how you can take those year-long goals and break them up into smaller parts. And we're just going to show you how to articulate that. SMART goals have been around for a bit, but it can be tricky to make sure that you're meeting all the criteria to ensure that it is a SMART goal. Just a heads up, our last webinar for this series is coming up on April 2nd. We're going to be determining needs and implementing intervention. We're also going to talk a bit about Tier 1 instruction in that as well. Professional learning communities aren't just about intervention and RTI. They certainly help you with figuring out those students who need additional help or need to be extended, but we also want to talk all about what that means for our Tier 1 instruction. Okay, first section here, I just want to, I'm going to turn off my camera just so that you have a little bit more space here that you can see. First things first, I just want to review PLC. We had a couple of people comment on the last webinar that they wish that they had seen the first one. So I just want to recap a little bit here to make sure we're all on the same page. So we talked about highly functional teams, what the common definition of PLC is, some practices that support that sustained routine and that process of effective communication. We talked about initial assessment options in the last webinar and how formatting the data is crucial to make sure that everybody can understand it. And then working on collaboratively analyzing it. So we went through the data dive cycle. So a recap. We're talking about, whenever we talk about PLC, a lot of people are thinking that we mean, oh, just those meetings that happen when we're looking at data. And that is true. Those can be called professional learning communities, but it's really a way of being. So it's not just the times that you're going to be looking at data that you're going to use a lot of these principles that you're learning. It's basically looking at information, constantly thinking about how we can improve and achieve better results for the students that we have. The three big ideas are ensuring that students learn, creating that culture of collaboration, and focusing on results. So again, it's not just what we do in meetings, it's what we do day in and day out. For the questions, driving questions of PLC, we're always thinking about what we want our students to learn, how we're going to know if they've learned it, what are we going to do if they haven't, and what are we going to do if they have? So all of these questions we're constantly trying to answer within our teaming structures in our schools and within our classrooms. When it comes to PLC, it's not just an I or we in my grade level or us that teach mathematics or reading or what have you. It is a whole school, all hands on deck. Everybody needs to buy into it, and everybody needs to have a part of it that they feel like they are able to contribute to, or at least understand a sense of. So we want that shared purpose. We want that vision to be the same for everybody. We want to have those commitments as our teams and as our schools and our districts that build off one another, and we want those goals to be shared amongst everybody. If you are an administrator, this is one of those things that you can implement PLCs in your schools, and you can create these types of meetings and feel like the culture is starting to be embraced by your staff. But if you aren't talking about it with them on a continuous basis, whether it be by grade level, by subject area, or what have you, make sure it's a part of your staff meetings. Have people talk about their successes, how they're doing, what they're doing. And that sort of culture begins to build over time. We talked a lot about effective teams and what that means. And we talked about John Hattie and having that collective teacher efficacy, everybody working towards the same goal. Again, not my students and your students, it's all of our students. That particular indicator for student success is the highest indicator you can have, is everybody working together. We have typically for a year, we want students to make a year's worth of growth, but collective teacher efficacy, as you can see on the right here, makes about 1.57, almost 1.6. So 1.5 years growth if you do it well. So that's really the basis of what we're talking about here too. We went and looked at the year-long roadmap. We talked about establishing teams. We've talked about what those instructional cycles might be. And we also talked about what the components of successful teams are, having those agreements or norms that help people understand the best ways to be effective as a team and what we want to make sure that we are adhering to so that we get work done. We want to create that climate of being safe and having people share a lot of their information with each other, and making sure that people have roles is a way to do that as well. We have all of these consistent protocols that we've been sharing with you, whether it be the note-taking template or the data dive protocol that we've gone through. We continue to talk about protocols. You've got the PLC binder. We're going to talk about these shared measurable goals today. The accountability piece is making sure that everybody knows what their part of the puzzle is and how what they're doing in their classroom or not doing or not bringing to meetings can be affecting others. And those defined timelines are going to help you make sure that everybody knows what they're doing and when. When we're talking about PLC, again, we're talking with that highly effective core instruction. We want to make sure that we're super dialed in on that. And as we continue, we just get better and better and better at that core instruction. We want, through this process, we can systematically identify those students who are or are not succeeding in our core program. We're looking at data a lot to figure out where students are at and how we need to figure out what we're teaching and how we're teaching. We're going to provide students, if needed, with additional time. We want them to master those targets. We really need to be understanding what we want students to be able to show and why we need them to show it and where they're going from there. So making sure we have those learning targets. And we want to obviously extend for students who are meeting those targets. I was just on site this week and we were talking about extension, and extension doesn't just mean more work. It means that you're having students think about skills in a different way. So extension doesn't equal more. All of this is done through peer collaboration with other educators in your building. That's the best way to get any of this done. We have the PLC cycles checklist that we talked to you about. All these things in blue are all of those protocols that we were talking about and those documents to help make this process understandable and really seamless for folks. And then we talked about initial assessment ideas. So we talked about specific program assessments, nationally normed assessments, any teacher created assessments, writing prompts, post assessments that might be from a previous cycle. And then again, making sure that we know where students are starting, so then we can move forward. And through our instruction, we're hoping that those particular areas will be improving. So your pre-assessment or your initial assessment and post-assessment should be similar. When we were looking at initial assessments, we want to make sure, again, it's directly aligned to those learning objectives. We want to make sure that you are assessing what you are preparing to teach and that you know where students are before you begin teaching it. We want to align any of the questions that are on a particular assessment with specific standards. We want to make sure, as we're thinking about the way that the assessments are structured, we want to try our best to be able to create different points of entry for students so that we know where students are starting. So every once in a while in a pre-assessment, you might do a little bit of a prerequisite skill and see how they're doing with that prerequisite skill before giving them the skill that they're going to be learning right now, or possibly an easier question where the depth of knowledge is more of a depth of knowledge 1 rather than like a 2 or a 3, so that we can kind of see where students are. The whole point of it is to show areas of strength and areas in need of improvement. When we're talking about utilizing data, we want to make sure it's compiled and it's accessible to everyone, not just format-wise, but also if it is on a Google Drive, everybody should know where it is. If it is not, everybody should have a copy of it. It should be represented in some sort of graphic way, whether it be a spreadsheet or some type of report. Everybody needs to know what they're looking at. We want to make sure that they see it in a visual way. We want to, on our assessments as much as possible, list the standard or standards that are being covered by specific questions. So you might be working off of proficiencies, you might be working off of competencies, whatever it is, you want them to be aligned on that particular assessment. And also the data that you're presenting so that you can see easily that they missed this particular question, and this is the area that was trying to get to, and this is what we might need to do a little bit more work with. So also, if you have any sort of rubrics or any sort of scoring criteria, you want to make sure that that is figured out before you actually correct anything. Specifically for writing calibration exercises are invaluable in the way that you want to just make sure you're all on the same page on how you're grading something. When we're talking about data collections, we can put part of the question in there. We can include the standards, like I said. We want to know how many points. We've talked in the past also about, like, if you're, let's use math as an example. If you're asking somebody to answer a question and draw out and show their thinking, that should be worth more than 1 point, because maybe they got the correct answer, but they're not able to explain their thinking. That's something that's really important for you to know as you're moving forward. We talked about just different ways. This is the example of the math where one particular questioning is asking them to do so many things that it's broken out into 4 different parts here. This is the data dialogue, data-driven dialogue. This is what we follow each time that we do a data dive cycle, and all the information on the protocol. If you haven't done it, it's really helpful to use that longer protocol to go through each step. And then we had the data-driven dialogue short form, where you're able to capture the information that you're seeing. We also talked about during each one of these phases, there's a silent time, and there's a time where you're going to be sharing your thoughts with your peers, but that silent time needs to be, even if you're great at looking at data and you feel like your team is dialed in, it's really helpful to still have that silent time in the beginning to make sure that everybody has the ability to wrap their head around the data, think about what they are inferring from it, and all of what they're observing before they share it with others. So don't forget that. This is just the general, each one of the phases. This is that long form, but shown on the screen just a little bit quicker. All right. So that is what we've discussed so far. So for the rest of today, we're going to look at ways to look at data. And then we're going to talk about creating year-long goals, creating those cycle goals or those shorter goals, and then we're going to wrap up. So getting into ways to look at data. We have different ways that we're looking at different types of data that we look at in classrooms. One of them is longitudinal. So longitudinal helps guide our instruction over an extended period of time. We're looking at longitudinally, so for longer periods of time. We want to think about this too. A lot of times that longitudinal data is something that's really easy to use to create SMART goals, because you're seeing over time, this is how students are doing, and this is how we would like them to improve. Different ways to look at longitudinal data. You can look at a single grade level, historical results. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. A lot of you folks out there are used to looking at cohort level historical results or your current year students. So I want to make sure that you understand what we talk about by single grade level historical results. So what this is that you're going to view grade level results from years prior to see how students are scoring. This is not cohort level. So the example that we have here is if I teach grade 5 and I've been teaching it for 3 or 4 years, I look at a specific piece of data and I see how students have scored for the last 4 years. A lot of times people use New Hampshire SAS for this. It is, here's how students have scored in my grade level in all of these areas over the last few years. It's super important for you to be able to look at your curriculum and teaching effectiveness. As we go through this, if you look at historically that students continue to be having a hard time with a specific set of standards or cluster of standards, then that's the easiest way to see that. It is regardless of the students, this is what it looks like over time. So there's something that we're doing here that is missing the mark. Students are either not understanding it, or it's not presented in a way that they're able to transfer those skills. It's also helpful to look at it without student names on things. We're so used to looking at students' names and saying, okay, these particular students, this is where they are. Let's figure out what we're going to do to improve their instruction. And that group is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So we want to look at it as a whole group, take the names off and say, okay, regardless, our low students aren't going to get this. Our medium students aren't going to get this. Our high students aren't going to get this. Overall, this has been really hard for everybody. So it can be used for that. Again, we're looking at strengths and weaknesses over multiple years. So we're able to really dial in on what we might be able to improve. And it's not a complete overhaul. It's okay, these are areas that we've not really, we haven't been able to have students transfer these skills. So what can we do in our classrooms to help build this up a little bit? And then you're going to focus on a group of standards rather than the students. And we're going to see what we can do for those instructional changes. So I always say we want to look at things that if we do small changes, it can create a large impact. The cohort level data that folks are used to looking at, again, you're viewing students' result from last year or years prior. This is to see how a specific group of students is doing. So you follow a specific group of students up through the grade levels. You can use this so that you can determine student skill levels and how they've been in the past. It allows you to see trends for specific students. Are the higher students staying? Are they making that adequate growth? Is anybody in general making that adequate growth? It can be a point of data for intervention or small group instruction. It can also help if you're in the beginning of a school year to help you plan for the new school year so you can see where students are coming in and say, okay, we know that they've got these particular skills, or that they might be coming in lacking these skills. So you might just need to do a little bit of pre-teaching during specific times of the year for whatever units that you feel like they might need a little bit of help with. The point of it is, though, is not to say our kids are coming in, I teach fifth grade, they're coming in really low with their fourth grade skills. So I'm going to spend 3/4 of my year teaching fourth grade skills and not really ever get to my fifth grade skills. There's a really delicate balance between those, but it can help you figure out where they are. And again, can help you if you look and you see that a particular year was really good for students, and they seem to rebound and then go back down, maybe you talk to those teachers, figure out what those strategies were, figure out how you might be able to help these students as best you can. We're also really used to looking at current year results. So we're looking at that the data from the students in our classroom from some sort of assessment or test they finished. Maybe we're looking at the previous year as they're coming in. We can use this data again to plan our instruction. You can create goals based off of that current data. We're going to be talking about that today. And then you can see that growth over a period of time. When we're looking at data, I want to talk a little bit about that formative data that we have in so many of our classrooms. Formative data is what guides our real-time instructional decisions. So it is not necessarily a summative assessment at the end of a unit. It's those exit tickets that you have or other things that you are doing that can help you sort of differentiate and figure out where students are at this particular point in time, and how can we figure out how to open up our instruction or make some changes to make sure that everybody's understanding the concepts and skills that we're teaching. We can look at formative data the same way we can look at it as a whole grade level. You can look at it as your own specific classroom level, and then you can look at it at the intervention or group level. I recommend, Marissa and I go in a lot of schools, and looking at the whole grade level is always, I feel like the best way to look at it. I know we want to see our certain students. Whenever we pull data for folks and it's the whole grade level, we can't help it as educators. We want to highlight all of our students that are in our classroom to see how they're doing. But it can be really helpful to look at it as a whole grade level to see, okay, are students across the board having trouble with these skills, or is it students in one particular classroom or another? Not to say that that teacher's not doing what they need to be doing, but maybe there's something that I'm missing in my instruction that you're doing in yours that's really resonating with students, or vice versa. So this is one of those, you check your ego at the door and you can look at it as a whole grade level, and it can really help you inform and move on and figure out how students are doing with specific skills. This is basically what I've just been talking about here. Again, you're looking at curriculum and teaching effectiveness for all of those teachers. It enables those peer-to-peer conversations about teaching practices, which is really essential to having effective teaming and having a culture of collaboration in those professional learning communities. It can work together on differentiation. It can help teachers create those intervention groups if needed. When we're looking at it at a classroom level, we can still do some of those things and we can see how our students are doing overall. You can still look at your curriculum and teaching effectiveness. It can help you differentiate and it can help you create intervention groups. You're just missing a big component of it, which is that peer-to-peer discussion about what's working and what isn't. So when we're looking at the data for our intervention and group level, obviously we can look at some of these progress monitoring results for specific groups. We can see overall where their strengths or where they aren't quite as far along in their skills as you would like them to be. We can again look at the teaching effectiveness in our intervention or small group. We can ensure that we're meeting those student goals. A lot of times with intervention, we have specific goals. It allows us to figure out how we're doing with those and helps you reassess. Is this student ready to move out of this group? Do we have to spend a little bit more time or what have you? Helps inform all whatever you're doing for your intervention. Things that we feel like data should be. We have data should be valid and it should be reliable. So what we mean by valid is that it's accurate, it's reliable, it's relevant, and the purpose that we're using it for matches what the goal is that you're trying to see for students. Having your assessments be relevant for the purposes is key. A lot of times we look at assessment data and we think that we're looking at something to be able to help inform our instruction, and then we look at it and we break it down and we say, this is missing the mark. I'm not really even sure that this is assessing what we think needs to be assessing, and you need to kind of reevaluate that. You want to make sure that you have those the conclusions that you're drawing from it are trustworthy and meaningful. This becomes a problem when you have a rubric or when you have some sort of way of scoring that can be variable from teacher to teacher. So you have to be really careful about that and do any sort of rendering protocols or making sure that everybody's on the same page with how they're grading. That feeds into this with the free from errors, bias, or distortion. And we want to make sure that we have reliable data collection methods and that we have established standards or protocols. This is also something of if you're doing something online and one teacher is really helping their students and allowing them to ask questions compared to in another class where the teacher is making sure that they're doing it completely independently, you want to make sure that you have validity in that. And valid data is essential for making informed decisions. When we talk about reliable, we want to make sure it's accurate, consistent, and trustworthy. Same type of thing. We want to make sure that we're all grading in the same way. We want to make sure it can help us draw conclusions. So having those standards or learning objectives or what have you directly aligned to the questions and knowing exactly what you're doing is going to help you with that. We want to make sure that we're consistent and then ensure that it accurately reflects that student performance. Again, if they're in a small group, how much extra help are they getting? Any of that should be put in there. And then we want to make sure that it is able to be used for that decision making that you're doing. I'm going to pause right there, make sure that nobody has questions about the type of data, and then I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Marissa, and she's going to start with the creating year-long SMART goals.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. We don't have any questions yet, but please, if any come up, the Q&A is perfect for asking them. So we're going to go into creating year-long goals first, and then we'll go through creating cycle goals, which will feed into that. So just a reminder that measurable goals, so those shared and measurable goals that are part of creating effective team, is really what guides the work of the PLC. And this allows, team members to have that follow through and gives them really a focus area. And when we create goals that are measurable, we're really able to determine how effective we are in our tier 1 instruction. So just a few reminders just from our creating effective teams about shared, articulated, and measurable goals is that these really allow teams to have a proof of efficacy. So it gives them kind of a path, to go on and a standard to which they hold themselves accountable. And I know we've talked about that word, accountable, but it really allows the PLC team to work together to meet a shared goal. It's important to know that, this goal must exist, but we can, revise the goal and revise the purpose for why we're here as we're going along. We're not like, you have to stick to this, but we do need one, and we need to make sure that whatever changes we're making, that there's valid points to why we're doing so. We need to make sure that action items are clear, so that everyone on the team knows what they should be doing and where they're going, and they must all tie into this measurable goal that we're creating. We need to make sure that these goals are meaningful not only for us, but for our students as well. We need to make sure that they are challenging. We're keeping our expectations high, but they're also achievable for us. And we want to make sure that we are consistently reviewing our goal, the purpose to why we're here, and that we are celebrating whenever, we can, however small or big a success, that we're making sure we're making any, we're celebrating those. So we have talked about establishing teams, and last week we talked about the data dive process. And we're now going to talk about the year-long goal, which goes along with that as well. So we're going to jump right in there. So Heather went through, the types of the ways you can look at data and use data. We need to make sure that when we're creating our year-long SMART goal, that we're either using multiple data points and or longitudinal data. So we're going to take you through an example of how we can do that, but we just want to make sure that in order for this goal to be relevant and valid, we need to make sure that we have multiple data points that show us that. So we're going to walk through how to create a SMART goal today, a measurable goal. And we're going to do that with a New Hampshire SAS. This is demo data for New Hampshire SAS for grade 3. This is ELA writing data. And this is 4 years of grade 3 data. So this is good because we have multiple data points that we're using in our tier 1 instruction. So if you've never seen this before or formatted in this way, We just have our different writing dimensions here. And then within those, we have our conventions, evidence and elaboration, organization and purpose. And then we have the number of points to the right. And then we have the percentage of kids who scored that certain amount of points. So if we look at conventions for informative or explanatory in the year 2022, 2023, 10% of kids scored 0 points, 30% of kids scored 1 point, 60% of kids scored 2 points. And we highlighted green where we want students to be, either 2 points for conventions or 3 points or 4 points for evidence and elaboration and organization and purpose. So this is a piece of data that we're going to take. This has multiple and reliable and valid data points. And we're going to create a year-long SMART goal based on this piece of data right here. So just like last week, if we were given that data in our PLC, we would do this data-driven dialogue protocol. So there were 5 phases. If you remember, we predict the data, we then observe the data, we're going to interpret data and make inferences. We then consider implications for practice, and then we reflect on that process and create a goal out of it. So here, again, we just have linked this protocol down on the left, and then down on the right is that template you would use when you're actually going through that process. So we're going to pretend like we went through this process for this grade 3 ELA writing data. And then once we go through that process in our PLC, we're going to create a SMART goal. I know maybe some of you have created SMART goals. Some teachers have to do that. If not, we're going to go through that, but just for what it stands for, it's a specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goal. And we're going to be able to walk through each of those in order to create it. So we're going to go through each of the sheets that are linked here. Just so you know, we have a worksheet that can go along with writing this goal. We have a protocol for how to create a SMART goal if you've never done one before, and then our action steps of what we do with that SMART goal. So here is the protocol for establishing year-long goals. It brings you through the step and how we can word our SMART goal in order to make sure that we are able to measure it, you know, in the beginning and at the end. This is the worksheet that can help you break down each part, you know, thinking about our intended outcome, you know, what makes this goal specific, what makes it measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, and then putting it all together at the end. So this just helps you break it apart, which you can use to help you write the SMART goal for whatever your piece of data you're looking at. And then this is part of our PLC binder as well. This is the year-long SMART goal action steps. You saw this last week with the data dive process as well, but this is where we put in, you know, what are we currently seeing in our grade 3 ELA writing classroom? And what is the year-long SMART goal based on that? What do we need? And then what are the cycle goals that's going to feed into and help us meet this year-long SMART goal? So when we're creating our year-long SMART goal, and today we're looking at writing, but we want to make sure that we are, you know, especially for ELA and writing, that we're choosing a goal that we can consistently revisit throughout the year. Math can get a little more difficult because, you know, we're not teaching the same thing all year long. So we do have some suggestions for that, which we'll go through in our next webinar. But just thinking about, we have this year-long goal, and now we have these 3 cycles and these cycle goals that are going to feed into it and help us reach that. So we have this kind of big picture of what we want, and now we're going to break down each part. So it's always important to make sure that we are looking at our standards in relation to our data. So whether that's, you know, the New Hampshire SAS that you're looking at, if you're looking at other, you know, data points, you want to make sure that those standards you have with you. So we have the writing standards here, and we'll go through these and show you how we use them as well with this. So for grade 3, we have it to the left. So thinking about, that piece of data for the 4 years of New Hampshire SAS, we obviously did not give you enough time to look at it or do a data dive, but for the sake of our PLC, that we went through that data dive process and we decided that, evidence and elaboration is an area of focus for students. We didn't not choose, the opinion writing or the informative writing because we didn't choose, the informative or opinion writing because we want to make sure that, we're not going to be working on opinion writing all year long. We want to choose a portion in both of those that students, whether they got informative or whether they got opinion, wherever they were struggling, we want to make sure that whatever piece of writing we're doing, that we can work on this skill. So we chose evidence and elaboration, that regardless of the writing we're doing, students need to work on this. So we decided that that's going to be our year-long goal. So after we were able to do that data dive process and determine our year-long goal, we want to make sure that we are writing a SMART goal for it, specifically so that we are able to measure it and measure it at the end. So this is part of that protocol that we have of how you can fill in the blanks to make sure that it is meeting the criteria for a SMART goal. So by the date of June 2024, we want grade 3 students to be able to show increased ability and providing appropriate evidence in writing. So that's that evidence and elaboration piece, as demonstrated by 50% of students scoring 3 points or higher on evidence and elaboration on the New Hampshire SAS summative assessment. Now, I just want to point out here that if you're able to look at it closely enough, I forget which one, I believe it was informative, that we had only 10% of students scoring 3 points or higher. I might be wrong on that, but we didn't. Yeah, we had 10% of students scoring 3 points or higher, in the year 2022, 2023, 35%, the year before, 10%, and 27%. And then if we get down to opinion, they're a little higher, but still it's 25%, 40%, 43, and 40%. So we talked about these goals being achievable. We want to make sure that sometimes we're not always looking for 100% proficiency. We're looking to make growth. We're looking for our students to grow. So you want to choose, there's no right answer, but you want to choose a score measure that's going to be challenging yet attainable for your students and you. So once we created our SMART goal, we have, put into our year-long goal action steps. We put the current situation where students are at within the past year. And then that's currently what's happening in our grade 3 classroom. And then we have our year-long SMART goal for where we want to be by next year. So that was on creating our year-long SMART goal. Just to recap, we looked at multiple and valid data points. We go through that data dive process, and then we want to choose an area, that we feel is, needed for students and that we can make some growth on for the year, and then creating a SMART goal out of that. Because we're going to now talk about creating our cycle goals, which will feed directly into that year-long goal. So once we did that year-long goal data dive, we're then going to create some SMART goals, cycle goals. So just a reminder, here's where we left off. We have our current situation and we have our year-long SMART goal. So now that we know that we're focusing on evidence and elaboration, we wanted to take another look at the writing standards. So we have our opinion pieces, we have our informative and explanatory pieces, and we have our narratives. So evidence and elaboration takes place in all 3 writing pieces. So we broke down the standard, we looked at those, the kinds of writing that our grade 3 students will do. So we had our evidence and elaboration year-long SMART goal at the top. And then we decided that for each cycle goal, we're going to focus on a piece of writing, and we're going to focus on evidence and elaboration within those writing pieces. So that way, no matter what type of writing we are teaching or working on, that we have a focus on this evidence and elaboration. So we are able to now just kind of lay out what our cycle goals are going to be. We don't have a SMART goal just yet, or a measurable goal. We're going to set that once the initial assessment is given. We did give some examples of that last week, but we're going to give another one today. So we can set those goals again once that initial assessment is given. We're going to focus on opinion for the first cycle. So we need to, determine an initial assessment in order to be able to create a cycle goal. So we're going to look at the standards again, and we're going to look at the standard for opinion writing. So you can see we have that outlined here. And we have here that we need to provide reasons that support the opinion. So that's the standard in opinion writing that focuses on evidence and elaboration. So just some reminders of those cycle assessments. I know we talked about initial assessments. We can use those same sort of pieces for cycle assessments. You have your specific program assessments. We have those nationally normed assessments you can use if you're able to dig into them to the point of their writing. You can have your teacher created assessment, something you do in your classroom already. Any writing prompts you might have specifically, that are going to measure evidence and elaboration. We can use, this is the first cycle, but especially with writing, and we're thinking of evidence and elaboration, when you give your post assessment based on how they do, that could be your initial assessment for the next cycle, depending on how they did. We can use end of unit common assessments with our grade levels, or any skills or progress monitoring tools. So once you determine what your initial assessment is going to be, we want to do that data dive process again. Whenever we're looking at data, especially to create a goal, we need to make sure we're doing that data dive process. So we're going to go through that. Again, that's here, our 5 phases. We have these linked here, so you always know where to find them. But we're doing this data-driven dialogue for our initial assessment. And we did that, and the initial assessment data shows that only 30% of students are showing that they are meeting expectations and providing appropriate reasons to support their opinion. So we found that, based on this, after this data dive, really 30% of students are meeting expectations. So once again, we are going to create a SMART goal because we need to make sure that we are able to measure this cycle from the beginning to the end of the cycle. We're measuring the growth that students are making. So we're going to still be specific and who it's about. So we decide that by January 2024, grade 3 students will be able to, we want to show increased ability in providing reasons to support their opinion. We want 50% of students scoring 3 points or higher on the evidence and elaboration portion on the grade 3 opinion writing rubric. So for our initial assessment, we used a rubric. And again, like Heather said, anytime you use a rubric, you want to make sure that, you're scoring it the same as other teachers. So that data is really able to be valid and reliable. So we use that rubric in order to figure out where students are at currently. We're able to now plug that into our cycle goals, and we're not going to have a measurable goal just yet for the next 2 cycles. Those will come once this first cycle is over, and we'll be able to make a SMART goal set that measure once we figure out, where they're at for informative and explanatory and narrative writing. So we have, done the initial assessment and data analysis phase. We've written these SMART goals. And what comes next is this instructional phase. So this is essentially what we're going to be doing next week. We want to now, based on this data and based on our SMART goal, determine what are we going to be doing in our tier 1 instruction, what, flexible groupings, what instructional strategies, what sort of things do we need to help students make growth in this area. We're going to collaborate with our peers and revise any instructional strategies. We want to collect formative assessment data that's going to help us drive our instruction. And we want to make sure that we're assessing any progress and identifying student needs along the way. There's one more thing I just wanted to add before we wrap up. I know a lot of times we talk to schools about how overwhelming, it can be, thinking that there's so much to work on. So I just hope that, if anything, that you can really choose a focus for your PLC group and you don't need to work on everything. So it makes it more manageable and able to, meet these goals and have make growth in our students. So just to point out that, you don't need to work on everything. We're just creating goals for specific parts. And then if you get through the year and, you've figured out what's working on how students are making growth and evidence and elaboration, then the next year you can choose a new goal of what you want to work on. So just to show that it's more manageable than some think it is.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off that too, Marissa, because just talking about, making things manageable and not feeling like you have to reinvent the wheel as you are doing some maybe different activities or looking at things a little bit differently when teaching this particular set of skills, and maybe doing what you've done before, but adding on or just revamping it a little bit. You're adding sort of that knowledge and that information into like what we call your toolbox, so that the next year that you teach it, even if it's not something that you're super focused on, you now have all of that information that you've gained on maybe a little bit more effective practices for teaching evidence and elaboration. And like Marissa said, you just kind of tick those off, sort of year by year, and you're just kind of building up your capacity and your understanding for how you can help students. The other thing that we really are hoping to make clear with creating SMART goals and not just having 1 year-long SMART goal and leaving it at that is, we all know what happens when we create that student learning objective or that SMART goal for the year. And for the most part, you're required to do it. Very few people ever go and look at it again. Maybe you look at it again in the middle of the year. Maybe you look at again at the end of the year, and you sort of don't change much of what you're doing in the classroom, but you just hope that their kids are going to do better. That's what we're trying to get away from here. We want to create that year-long goal, and then you have your cycle goals that are created along with that, so that all along the way you're assessing how students are doing and seeing what progress they are making. So I just wanted to do that. So hopefully that helps a little bit as well. Anything else you wanted to add there, Marissa?
No, I think that was it.
Okay, great.
So just a wrap up. Ryan, I'm glad that breaking it down for you was able to help. Small goals definitely make large impacts. So just a reminder that this is our PLC binder. It's linked. So we have all the documents and we have them in order that's helpful. But we also have them linked in here as well. But this is the whole binder for you. Again, if you have any questions, we're here. So definitely ask them in the Q&A or the chat. And again, there's our contact information, Heather, myself, and also Kristen Crawford. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to us. Thank you so much for coming and happy Wednesday.
Enjoy your afternoon. Thanks for being with us. Take care.